Samson is one of the most fascinating and complex figures in the Bible. One day, as Manoah's wife worked alone in the field, an angel of the Lord appeared to her. This is the full story and birth of Samson in the Bible. Chapter 1. The birth of a deliverer. A nation in trouble. The people of Israel were once again in deep trouble. They had disobeyed God, turned to idols, and forgotten the ways of their fathers. As they drifted from truth, they also lost their protection. The powerful nation of the Philistines rose up and conquered them. For 40 years, Israel groaned under the weight of oppression. They had no leader, no army, no hope. But God had not forgotten His people. A barren woman, a divine message. In the small tribe of Dan, there lived a man named Manoah and his wife. They were a faithful couple, but they carried a quiet sorrow. They had no children. In that culture, barrenness was a heavy burden, but in God's plan, it was often the beginning of a miracle. One day, as Manoah's wife worked alone in the field, an angel of the Lord appeared to her. His presence was brilliant, radiant, terrifying, yet peaceful. "You are barren and childless," the angel said, "but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son." Judges 13:3. She held her breath. "Now then," the angel continued, "you must drink no wine or fermented drink and eat nothing unclean, because the boy will be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." Judges 13:5. The Nazirite vow. This child wouldn't be like other children. He would be set apart from birth, under a sacred promise called the Nazirite vow. That meant no wine or strong drink, no unclean food, no razor would ever touch his hair. These outward signs symbolized an inward calling. He would be wholly devoted to God. Manoah's response. The woman ran to her husband, breathless with excitement. "A man of God came to me. He looked like an angel. He told me we will have a son, and that he must be raised as a Nazirite." Manoah listened carefully, but he wanted to hear it himself. He prayed, "Lord, please let the man of God return to us again and teach us how to raise the boy." God answered. The angel appeared again to Manoah's wife while she was alone. She ran to get her husband. When Manoah met the angel, he asked, "When your words come true, what is to be the rule that governs the boy's life and work?" The angel repeated his message. "Your wife must do all I have told her. She must not eat anything that comes from the vine or anything unclean. The boy is to be set apart to God from the womb." A heavenly sign. Manoah wanted to honor this visitor. "Let us prepare a young goat for you." But the angel said, "Even if I stay, I will not eat your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord." Manoah, still unaware this was an angel, asked for his name. "Why do you ask my name?" The angel replied. "It is beyond understanding." Judges 13:18. Manoah prepared the offering and placed it on a rock. And then, something miraculous happened. As the flames rose from the altar, the angel ascended in the fire and disappeared into the sky. Manoah and his wife fell face down in awe. "We are doomed to die," Manoah cried. "We have seen God." But his wife, with faith in her heart, calmed him. "If the Lord had meant to kill us, He wouldn't have accepted our offering or shown us these things." A child is born. In the months that followed, the woman conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samson, meaning like the sun. And as the boy grew, the Spirit of the Lord began to stir in him. This child, born to a barren woman in a time of darkness, would soon become God's answer to Israel's oppression. He would be the strongest man the world had ever seen. But his greatest battles would not be against armies. They would be within his own heart. Chapter 2. The Nazirite's Vow. A man set apart. Samson grew up under the shadow of divine purpose. From childhood, his parents reminded him that his life was not his own. He was a Nazirite, set apart by God, chosen to begin the deliverance of Israel from the Philistines. He never drank wine. He never touched unclean things. And his long, uncut hair was a living sign of his vow. The Spirit of God would come upon him at times, stirring him with holy strength. But as he entered manhood, something else stirred inside him too: desire. And that desire would test the vow that had shaped his life. A dangerous attraction. One day, Samson went down to Timnah, a city in Philistine territory. As he walked among the foreign streets, he saw a Philistine woman, beautiful, bold, and unlike anyone in Israel. He returned home and told his parents, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." Judges 14:2. His parents were dismayed. "Isn't there a woman among your own people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines?" But Samson insisted. "She is the one for me. Get her." What Samson didn't realize was that God was at work, even through his flawed desire. The Lord was using this moment to begin a conflict with the Philistines, the lion and the spirit. As Samson journeyed again to Timnah, a young lion suddenly attacked him near the vineyards. But the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and Samson tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as easily as if it were a young goat. He told no one, not even his parents. He simply walked on as though nothing had happened. Later, on another visit to see the woman, he passed the carcass of the lion. To his surprise, a swarm of bees had made honey inside it. Samson scooped out the honey and ate it. But in doing so, he broke his vow, touching a dead body, which was forbidden for a Nazirite. Still, he said nothing. One compromise, covered in silence. The riddle at the feast. As was custom, a wedding feast was arranged. For 7 days, Samson celebrated with 30 Philistine companions. Wanting to amuse himself, he challenged them with a riddle. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. Judges 14:14. They had 7 days to solve it. The Philistines grew frustrated. They couldn't solve the riddle. So they turned to Samson's bride, betrayed by his wife. The men threatened her. "Get the answer from your husband, or we'll burn you and your father's house down." In fear, she wept and begged Samson each day. "You don't really love me. You haven't told me the answer." On the 7th day, Samson gave in and told her. She immediately told the Philistines. At sunset, they came with their answer. "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson's eyes narrowed. "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Judges 14:18. He was furious. Power unleashed. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him again, not for deliverance, but for vengeance. Samson went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 Philistines, stripped them of their clothes, and gave their garments to the men who had solved the riddle. Then he left in rage and returned to his father's house, leaving the wedding unfinished. In his absence, his bride was given to another man, his companion. The inner struggle Samson was born for greatness. He was chosen by God, empowered by the Spirit, but his desires warred against his calling. The vow on his head was meant to reflect the vow in his heart, but Samson's heart was divided. He had strength, but little self-control. He had power, but lacked wisdom. And now, his story of deliverance had begun, not with triumph, but with betrayal, blood, and broken vows. Chapter 3. The Lion and the Riddle. Samson's revenge begins. A man wronged. When Samson left his wedding feast in rage, he had no intention of abandoning his bride forever. After all, the betrayal had been bitter, but he still considered her his wife. So, after some time had passed, Samson calmed his anger and returned to Timnah, bringing a young goat as a gift of reconciliation. He approached his bride's home. "I'm going to see my wife," he told her father. But the man shook his head. "I was so sure you hated her. I gave her to your companion. But wait, her younger sister is even more beautiful. You can have her instead." Samson's heart hardened. What began as a personal insult was now becoming a war. "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." Judges 15:3 Foxes and fire. Samson stormed away from the house and devised an unusual plan. He captured 300 foxes, tied them together in pairs by the tail, and fastened a torch between each pair. Then he lit the torches and released the foxes into the Philistines' grain fields. Flames roared across the dry landscape, burning. Standing grain, stacked grain vineyards, olive groves. Everything the Philistines relied on for food and trade, destroyed. Samson's revenge was complete, but the war was just beginning. Retaliation and escalation. When the Philistines saw what had happened, they asked, "Who did this?" Someone answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the man from Timnah. He burned our crops because his wife was given to another man." The Philistines responded with brutal vengeance. They burned Samson's wife and her father to death. The same threat they once used to manipulate her had now become her fate. When Samson heard, his fury erupted. "Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge." Judges 15:7. Just as Samson attacked the Philistines again, this time slaughtering many of them. Afterward, he retreated to a cave in the rock of Etam, alone and hunted. The Philistines, determined to capture him, marched into Judah, one of Israel's own tribes. "We've come to bind Samson," they told the men of Judah. "Do not resist us, and we won't destroy you." To avoid conflict, 3,000 men of Judah went to the cave and said to Samson, "Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? Why are you causing trouble?" Samson answered, "I only did to them what they did to me." They promised not to kill him themselves, only to tie him up and hand him over. So Samson let them bind him with 2 new ropes, and they led him to the Philistines. A sudden strength. As Samson approached the Philistines, they shouted with glee. But in that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes around his arms became like charred flax, falling away as though they were thread. Looking around, Samson found the fresh jawbone of a donkey. He picked it up, and with that improvised weapon, he struck down 1,000 Philistines. When the dust settled, Samson stood surrounded by the dead. He tossed the jawbone aside and cried, "With a donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." Judges 15:16. Thirst and grace, exhausted and dehydrated, Samson fell to the ground and cried out to God, "You've given me this great victory, but must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" God heard. He opened a hollow place in the ground, and water flowed out. Samson drank, and his strength returned. That spring was called En-Hakkore, meaning the spring of the one who cried out, and it remained there for years. A complicated hero. Samson judged Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. He was feared by enemies, admired by some, and misunderstood by many. He was fierce, unpredictable, and deeply flawed. But God had chosen him, not for perfection, but for purpose. And though Samson often fought his battles alone, the Lord's hand was never far. Chapter 4. Delilah's Trap. A dangerous pattern. After 20 years of leading Israel, Samson remained a man of immense strength, but his weakness for women had never left him. Though chosen by God and empowered by the Spirit, Samson still allowed his desires to lead him, often into the arms of women who cared more about power than purpose. One day, Samson went to Gaza, a major Philistine city. There he saw a prostitute and spent the night with her. Word spread quickly. "Samson is here." The Philistines set a trap. They planned to kill him at dawn. But Samson got up in the middle of the night, tore off the city gates, poles and all, and carried them to the top of a nearby hill. He escaped again, unharmed, unstoppable, and unaware that his greatest enemy was not the Philistines, but himself. Delilah enters. Sometime later, Samson fell in love with a woman from the valley of Sorek. Her name was Delilah. She was beautiful, persuasive, and seductive. But unlike the others, Delilah was strategic. The Philistine rulers approached her with a chilling offer. "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him and tie him up. Each of us will give you 1,100 silver coins." Judges 16:5. Delilah agreed. This wasn't love. This was betrayal for a price. The first lie, Delilah began her mission. "Tell me, Samson," she purred, "what is the secret of your strength? How can you be tied up and subdued?" Samson, playing along, gave her a false answer. "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." That night, while he slept, Delilah tied him with bowstrings. Philistine men waited in hiding. She shouted, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." Samson snapped the strings effortlessly. Delilah was furious. "You made a fool of me. You lied to me. Tell me the real secret." The second and third lies. He told her again, "If I'm tied with new ropes that have never been used." She tried it. It failed. Then he said, "If you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on the loom." She wove his hair and pinned it, but once again, he broke free. Delilah grew more manipulative. "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me?" Day after day, she nagged, pleaded, and pushed, until Samson's spirit was worn down. The secret revealed. At last, Samson gave in. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he confessed, "because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." Judges 16:17. Delilah knew this was the truth. She sent word to the Philistine rulers. "Come back once more. He has told me everything." That night, she lulled Samson to sleep on her lap. A man came and shaved off the 7 braids of his hair, and Delilah began to torment him. His strength left him. The Lord had left him. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he didn't know. The Lord had left him. Judges 16:20. For the first time in his life, Samson was powerless. The strength that had once terrified nations was gone. The spirit that had empowered him from birth was silent. He had traded divine strength for momentary pleasure, and now he would pay the price. Chapter 5. A prisoner of the Philistines, bound and broken Samson, once feared as the strongest man in Israel, was now a prisoner of the very people he had once terrorized. The Philistines seized him, bound him with bronze shackles, and did the unthinkable. They gouged out his eyes. Judges 16:21. The man who had once seen angels, enemies, and victories now lived in darkness. They dragged him to Gaza, where he was forced to grind grain in a prison mill like a slave, an animal of labor. The once mighty warrior became a blind grinder of grain, Mocked by his captors, his strength gone, his dignity stripped, the fall of a hero. This was Samson's lowest point. He had been chosen by God before birth, set apart by a vow, blessed with the Spirit, gifted with supernatural strength. But one by one, he had compromised. He touched the dead carcass of the lion, he married a Philistine. He broke his Nazirite vow. He gave his heart to Delilah. He revealed the secret of his strength, and now he reaped what he had sown. Yet even here, in the dark, in chains, in disgrace, God had not abandoned him. But his hair began to grow. In the silence of the prison, Samson had time to think, to reflect, to remember, to repent. And as the days passed, something changed. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Judges 16:22. The regrowth of his hair wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. It marked the slow return of the vow, the slow rise of purpose, the mercy of God quietly restoring a fallen man, a day of celebration and mockery. The Philistines, certain Samson was no longer a threat, planned a great celebration in honor of their false god, Dagon. "Let's bring Samson out to entertain us," they said. Judges 16:25,000 gathered in the temple of Dagon. The main hall was packed with men and women, rulers and citizens. Over 3,000 people watched from the roof. Samson was brought out, a blind, broken man. They laughed at him, jeered, cheered. The man who once brought down armies was now a trophy, a symbol of their victory over Israel's God. But what they didn't know was that God wasn't finished with Samson yet. One final prayer. As Samson stood between the two central pillars of the temple, he turned to the young servant who led him by the hand. "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so I may lean against them." Then Samson prayed, not for vengeance, not for pride, but for one last act of purpose. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Judges 16:28. He placed his hands on the 2 pillars, his right on one, his left on the other. And with all the strength left in his soul, he cried, "Let me die with the Philistines." The collapsed Samson pushed with all his might. The stone pillars cracked, the walls trembled, the massive temple of Dagon collapsed, and with it, every ruler and citizen inside. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Judges 16:30. The blind man who had fallen so far had now fulfilled his calling. Not perfectly, not without failure, but faithfully, in the end. A quiet burial. Later, Samson's brothers and family came to Gaza. They gathered his body and buried him in the tomb of his father, Manoah, between Zorah and Eshtaol. A final reflection. Samson was not a flawless hero. He was impulsive, prideful, driven by appetite more than obedience. But he was also chosen, empowered, redeemed. He showed us that God can use even the broken, even the fallen, when they turn back to him. Samson's greatest victory didn't come through his strength. It came through his surrender. Chapter 6. The Legacy of Strength and Weakness. The story of contrast. The story of Samson is one of the most striking and complex in the Bible. It's not just a tale of strength, it's a portrait of conflict. Between calling and compromise, between power and purpose, between what God intended and what Samson pursued. He was a miracle child, set apart before birth. He was filled with the Spirit, empowered to shake nations. And yet, his greatest battles were not against Philistines, but against himself. Chosen from the womb, from the very beginning, Samson's life was shaped by divine intention. God had heard the cry of Israel. He had chosen a barren woman to carry a deliverer. He gave Samson strength beyond imagination, not for fame, but for freedom. His Nazirite vow was a symbol of that calling. No wine or strong drink, no touching of unclean things, no cutting of hair. These were more than rituals. They were daily reminders that Samson belonged to God. But Samson often forgot what set him apart. A heart divided. Samson's weakness wasn't his hair. His real weakness was his heart. He was ruled by impulse. He married a Philistine woman because she looked good to him. He broke his vow by touching the lion's carcass. He told riddles and killed out of pride and rage. He laid with prostitutes and fell in love with Delilah, a woman who would betray him for silver. Though he was mighty in body, Samson was often weak in character, a god of mercy. And yet, through all the rebellion, failure, and compromise, God never abandoned him. Even in a Philistine prison with his eyes gouged out and his strength gone, God was working. But his hair began to grow again. Judges 16:22. That small phrase carries great hope. It means restoration is possible. It means failure is not final. Samson's final prayer wasn't a grand speech. It was a desperate cry. Sovereign Lord, remember me, strengthen me one last time. And God answered. Because God responds not to perfection, but to humility, strength in surrender. In the end, Samson accomplished more in his death than in his life. Not by tearing gates from walls, not by killing lions or Philistines, but by surrendering, by trusting God in his weakness. Let me die with the Philistines, he said. And as the temple fell, so did Samson, with honor restored. His story teaches us that the true measure of strength is not in what you can lift, but in who you trust. What we learn from Samson 1. God uses imperfect people. Samson's flaws were real, but so was his calling. If God waited for perfect people, no story would ever begin. 2. Strength without character is dangerous. Samson's greatest victories came when he remembered his purpose. Without purpose, his strength became reckless. 3. Compromise is costly. Every time Samson broke his vow, he moved further from his identity. His downfall didn't come suddenly. It came step by step. 4. God gives second chances. Even when bound and blind, Samson could pray. And God was listening. Always. 5. Surrender is the beginning of victory. Samson's greatest act of faith wasn't in his fists, but in his final prayer. The legacy of Samson died between two pillars, but his legacy stands between two truths, that even the strongest can fall and even the fallen can be restored. He is remembered in Hebrews 11, the chapter of faith. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah. Hebrews 11:32. Despite his failures, Samson is listed among the heroes of faith, not because he was flawless, but because he finished in faith. Final reflection. You don't have to be perfect to be used by God. You just need to be willing to listen, to return, to surrender. Samson's story may be messy, but it's real. And it reminds us that no matter how far we fall, God can still say, I'm not finished with you yet.